Wait.
Okay. Oh, wait. I should wait. Don't hit that button. Is that what you're telling me?
I'm kidding.
That big red thing that says on air?
Uh-oh.
That's what. Hey, we actually may have a couple new listeners tonight, too. Can you believe that?
Yay.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we're all in shock, right? What's that? What does that mean? All right. I'm semi-prepared tonight, so I'm going to try to start the show. I think, yeah. And I have Warren's voice again a little on this one tonight. And, of course, you won't get to hear it, Brad. But here we go. We're going to start the next episode of the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. Check it out.
Fire it up, Holmes!
Don't hang on to outdated imperialist dogma. Be free for the next episode of the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. And now, the Annoying Peasants.
That would be us, by the way. Brad can't hear that part, so that was Warren's intro saying, and now the Annoying Peasants. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. It must be 7 o'clock on a Tuesday.
Here's that way.
How are you guys tonight?
I am just fine. I'm gonna try to turn this music down, but I can't remember how to do it on this. Oh yeah, I sort of got it. All right, sorry about that.
I'm good. I'm trying to manage all this technology here. I'm confused, but
No, she's not. Tanya is slowly getting training on how to run the.
I'm trying. Maybe by this time next year, I'll know how to flip the switch on.
I think you will be able to handle that in short order. So, anyway. You want to start us off, Brad? Maybe he doesn't. I don't know if did we lose him?
Where'd he go?
I don't hear him. Do you hear him? Shoot. Brad,
Hello?
We cannot hear you.
Hello.
See, this happened, I think this happened last show, if I remember right. Or it might have been the prior show. Brad, if you can hear me, I'm going to cut the line and I'll call you right back. I'll Skype you right back. So here we go. Sorry, everybody. Like I say, I think this is 2 shows in a row. This is so odd that, I just had him. We're talking to him. The show starts.
Well, I've got the chat room open, and I see that Tim is there. Hello, Tim.
Oh, hey, Tim.
So we got something going on here.
Do we have Brad back?
Can you hear me now?
There
I
he
can hear.
is.
I don't know what.
Hi, Brad.
Did that happen last week, Brad?
Yeah, I hate it when I'm talking to you guys and you can't hear me. It really hurts my feelings.
Aw.
Hey, now you know what my whole life feels like. I talk to people, they don't listen to me. It's like I'm not here. It's all right.
I have children, so I'm in touch with that emotion.
Hey, we got to ask Tim, is it wet down there? I think, Tim says he can't hardly hear Brad.
Oh, no.
All right, wait. All right, I'm going to try something here. I think.
Turn him up.
Yes. All right, maybe he'll be a little better. I think I turned him up, but
Check. Can you hear me?
yeah, Tim says they're drenched. Yeah, we'll wait for Tim's response before you can really officially start the show. How's that, Brad?
Sounds like a plan.
Are you right up to your mic, or pretty much as close as you can get?
I am.
Okay. I don't know if. Yeah, Tim says never you've seen this much rain, even up north. How about Brad's volume, Tim? Any better? The weird thing is, and I don't understand this, how you can sound just fine to me, right? Because our signals get combined and then shipped out. Well, how does it choose to, have yours at a lower volume after it sounds fine coming into me?
It's a government conspiracy.
It is. I was talking to...
He said it's a little better.
Okay, cool. I'll turn up a little bit more and hopefully it won't distort.
Talk real loud, Brad.
No problem.
Talk like you mean it. Alrighty. Yeah. Oh, he says it, but it comes in and out. See, that is so weird. We got to get a hold of that guy that we were talking about, Brad, and get this fixed and get it to be water under the bridge, as it were. I just used that analogy for Tim.
We need a guy.
Yeah.
If
Guy
I'm
who
not
knows what to
coming
do.
through, Tom, maybe we need to look at Plan B, and you guys take over.
We'll keep you on for a little bit here. Well, tell you what, I'll start us off then, and we'll see how it goes, and you chime in as you see fit, and then we'll see if it comes back. If it comes and goes, who knows? Maybe it comes in a little bit, and you're just fine. So anyway, I'll start us off by welcoming everyone to this episode of the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. My name is not Brad. Actually, I'm Tom, and I'm joined by Brad and Tanya, the Northwoods mom. Thanks for joining us again, Tanya. It's fantastic to have you with us.
Good to be here as usual.
Yeah, and we have tonight's episode is entitled. Here's my title I made: Representative Government or Legalized Corruption. Dun, 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 dun. But thanks for joining us, everybody. I know it's going to be a great topic. Tanya's got a lot of info and a lot of stuff that Tanya and I were just talking that we never learned in school. We wonder why.
We always get a history lesson. We find out so much new stuff.
Yeah, that is what is so cool. And Tanya knows a lot more about this than I do. So it'll be very interesting for me. I get to learn a lot.
I was thinking this was such a fun topic, and then I was thinking that maybe my idea of a fun topic
I know
isn't what everyone else's is, and that maybe I'm just kind of a dork. So, no, but it's very interesting and intriguing, I think. If you stay with us, if it doesn't sound interesting to you, I think there will be some facts that will be enlightening, some history that you don't know, stuff like that.
That I know we're already off the beaten path because we're really good at that. The video that I know you saw, because I think you sent it to me first. I can't remember if I sent it to you or you sent it to me or whatever, but it was that something .us. Was it represent?
Represent dot us. That was the article was Congress literally doesn't care what you think.
That's the one. Yes.
And there's a video embedded in that.
Yes.
Article.
That we didn't put on the Facebook page yet, did we?
I don't know.
I don't think
it's on there.
I can't remember if it's on there.
If it's not there yet, it will be.
Yeah, we got to put that up there because that'll be a good reference for everybody who listens to the show. And it's like a 5 or 6 minute video, if I remember right, something like that, Tanya.
Yeah, I think so, about 5 minutes. And I see also on the page here that Tim posted a couple of blog posts that I had not had time to read in my busy week. So that's good stuff. So check that out. He always has good stuff that he writes.
I think Tim says it's there on the Facebook page.
Is it?
Yep. So if
do we have it? Maybe I didn't go down far enough.
If it is in fact there,
yep. Okay, there it is.
Cool.
Right below Tim's picture.
Yeah. So go to the Annoying Peasant Radio Facebook page and scroll down a little bit, and you can find that video and watch that at your leisure. And it will. You need to watch that if you have any interest in this topic.
It's the one that says corruption is legal in America.
Yeah. So very, very interesting. Let me get back to my docket here. So I'll go back to. In case we do have a couple newcomers tonight, I just want to provide a brief look at the big picture on the show, just so kind of people get a backdrop of what we typically talk about and with a broad brush. I would still argue that most hold that we put forth a radical political philosophy, the political philosophy of freedom, or a legal theory, if you will. The idea is essentially that everyone is free to pursue his or her own life interests, provided such pursuits are peaceful. One way to illustrate peaceful from a legal standpoint is to quote Lysander Spooner's description of one's legal duties, which is comprised really of two parts. He says, first, that each man shall do toward every other all that justice requires him to do. As, for example, that he shall pay his debts, that he shall return borrowed or stolen property to its owner, and that he shall make reparation for any injury he may have done to the person or property of another. Which sounds pretty reasonable, I think, to me. I don't know to characterize that. But he goes on with a second condition of justice, and that is that each man shall abstain from doing to another anything which which justice forbids him to do. As, for example, that he shall abstain, I wrote form, but it's from committing theft, robbery, arson, murder, or any other crime against the person or property of another. So these are your or one's legal obligations, essentially to respect property rights that are rooted in self-ownership. So I think most people are kind of like, okay, that doesn't sound too earth-shaking. What's the big deal? Why would you do a whole show on this? But I'd go further and say Lysander Spooner goes on to describe that man has duties in addition to his legal duties. Man no doubt owes, is a quote from him, man no doubt owes many other moral duties to his fellow men, such as to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, shelter the homeless, care for the sick, protect the defenseless, assist the weak, and enlighten the ignorant. Hey, that's where we come in. Enlightenment.
That's our job.
Yes. But these are simply moral duties of which each man must be his own judge in each particular case as to whether and how far he can or will perform them. But of his legal duty that we spoke just prior, that is, of his duty to live, his duty to live honestly towards his fellow men not only may judge, but for their own protection must judge. And if need be, they may rightfully compel him to perform it. So man's moral duties are distinct, separate from your legal duties. And at the moment, it's the state that is in charge of the legal apparatus. And I think most are with us so far, but here's where the fork in the road kind of hits. The great divide comes in for many when we support these above-mentioned legal duties, I'll just use the maybe crazy term, maniacally. That is, they apply to all people in all places at all times, universally, in other words. And this sets up the confrontation with the state, which is the territorial monopolist of ultimate decision-making with the power to tax. And I would argue that the state is a violation of justice in its very existence and in everything it does. So stay with us, because I know a lot of people are like, huh? That's crazy. So stay with us to gain the proper context to understand these very weighty statements and just how the state violates the very freedoms it claims to protect. We hope we will inspire you to think. Brad, you want to give us a shot? I got you on the bumper sticker quote. I thought you might have a little fun with that one for the night. So if you will.
I put my headset on. Is that any better?
It sounds fine to me. It sounds different, but it sounds fine. Again, it always sounds fine on my end. It's what goes out the final pipe.
So I'm just the bumper sticker quote is under Republicans, man exploits man. Under Democrats, it's just the opposite.
And I think we've said that many times on this show that we feel that the difference between Democrats and Republicans, you're just splitting hairs.
For sure.
And I know most devout Republicans or devout Democrats would definitely have a beef with that. But the basic argument I think that all of us would propose here is, well, both parties are happy to violate your property rights. They don't have any qualms with that. It's just, what are they going to do with the proceeds after they stole some of your wealth?
Right.
That's where the argument for them is. And even by and large, of all the money that they would spend on different projects, what percentage do they really differ on? Again, I don't know that number, but it's actually not that large.
And the argument or the discussion of whether they should even be doing that in the first place has all but disappeared.
Yeah, it doesn't take place.
I think we're trying to take it back to kind of that foundational discussion of is that initial action of taking your property or attempting to control your life or your behavior, are those even just? Is that even permissible in the first place? So kind of basic stuff.
And by the way, Tim's saying he thinks it's worse with your headset on, by the way, Brad.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Nothing's...
He's quiet in my head, and you're really loud. I was trying to decide. I think, is this where I turn it down? But then I might not be able to hear Brad.
Yes, it'll turn us both down, actually.
Okay.
So you could just...
That's better, but I haven't heard Brad yet, so I don't know if I'll be able to hear him.
That's because when I speak into the mic, I'm darn near chewing on the thing.
I'm trying. That's what you told me to do. Yeah. Just like karaoke, right?
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, let me go, for people who move this along quickly. I actually have a little clip here that I'm going to want to play here in a second if I can get to the right thing. We played this last week I think it was last week. We tried to end on a little bit of humor. If it wasn't last week, it was the week before. It escapes me. I can't remember. But let me kind of intro what we're going to talk about tonight. On this episode, we're going to contemplate the notion of a representative government with the Northwoods mom, of course. We'll contemplate if this has ever been possible, actually. And we'll illustrate that the state has, in fact, legalized corruption. And why would they do this? Make the simple argument to benefit themselves at the expense of everyone else. In the following discourse, we will attempt to uphold the notion of justice. We will attempt to uphold property rights rooted in self-ownership. We ask you to listen closely and critique our discussion as we proceed to make the case that you are, in fact, unfree, that you do not have a say in the system, that your vote, in fact, does not matter, and that the system is and has been designed to benefit the connected and elites, or the club. And let me play just here a little bit from George Carlin. It'll be like 45 seconds. Here's where he's going to talk about the club. And, of course, he can put it in a much more humorous way. And by the way, just anybody listening, there's no language on this. No bad language.
That was my next question.
Yeah. This next 45 seconds, we're okay. So here we go. This is George Carlin.
I'm talking about the real owners now. The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else.
Okay, so, so you can kind of maybe get the setup of where we're coming from a little bit there. But the first step, so basically somebody could tune in and say, well, all you're doing is whining about the system. And that's in fact the case. But the first step to improving our condition, to essentially regaining justice, is education, right? We have to understand where we are, and we have to understand where we'd like to wind up. So all I can say with that is prepare yourselves for Tanya's presentation. We invite you to think and comment in the chat room, and we know Tim's already doing that, and we definitely appreciate that. Appreciate you being there, Tim. By the way, my brother said there's a creek down there in Dallas that he bike rides over. He says normally it's like 2 or 3 feet deep. He says it's 37 feet deep.
Whoa.
That's how much water we're talking about. And I saw Houston's underwater, so there, you can go snorkeling there now. All right, so I'll go with the announcements, just so everybody knows, and we do this every week. AgoraFest 2015 at the Villa Maria Conference Center and Retreat. Again, September 24th to 27th. We had Nick Ludwig on a week or two ago, whatever that was, and I'm sure we're going to have him on again before the 24th.
Yeah, he was great. That was funny.
Yeah, we had fun with him. He had a good.
I really enjoyed that. I was laughing out loud.
Yeah, he's got a good sense of humor. And just a couple more things before we get going, Tanya. I encourage everyone to watch Justice, What's the Right Thing to Do, episode 12, debating same-sex marriage from Harvard Business School with Michael Sandel. By the way, that's the final episode in the series. I enjoyed that whole series tremendously. I'm a great fan of Michael Sandel as a lecturer. In other words, I believe he asks the right questions. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just had the feeling or left with the impression that he does a little more commentary the further he gets in as he gets closer, obviously, to episode 12. And I would argue he's definitely a statist, and he lets a little bit of that come through. But I think it's not that you necessarily watch it for the conclusions or the interrogatories of Michael Sandel. To me, it was the questions that are raised in those lectures are the ones that are most important. And hopefully, again, they can get you to think a little bit about this stuff. I think so. That's all I have to say on there. Of course, I think that one I don't recall if I posted on the Facebook page. I don't know if I put episode 12. If I didn't, I'll check. If I didn't, I'll put it up there. So you can just go to the Annoying Peasant Radio Facebook page and click on that link. And then I guess one other thing I want to encourage everyone to watch our Facebook page, because Tanya, Tim, and Cassie do a great job of keeping fresh stuff on there, interesting stuff. And I enjoy the stuff they post a lot of times too. So I check out our own page, just say, hey, did somebody put something cool and new on there?
I know there's lots of us posting on there now, so you just never know.
Yes. And Tim gets a few good conversations going once in a while, so it's very interesting.
Okay.
Our next live show will be next Tuesday. That will be June 2nd at 7 Central. And I'm thinking of a number of topics. I haven't decided on anything, so I can't really tell you what we're going to talk about. But we'll have it figured out. I know Brad texted me a little earlier today, and he said he wanted me to comment a little bit on Memorial Day. And I think that actually is a fun one to talk about for a little bit.
Those are always the difficult holidays for us, I think, to
yes, because
stay off your Facebook feed.
Don't say much.
Crawl under a rock.
I put a couple of statements in here, and I think, what is it? 1, 2, 3. I think about the fourth one in, I write, basically, I know this is not a popular position. However, I believe it's a principled one. And when principles run against popularity, I think that's where it really gets tough, because you get ostracized, you get hammered. But I guess I always feel like I kind of don't have a choice, because I can't abandon my principles because people will disagree with me. I have to, I guess, take my lumps, and the few people who really might be open to a real dialogue, I'll engage them. The ones that I think are just really wanting to hammer me, then I do have to crawl under a rock and call it a day.
Well, you can be quite misunderstood, and I think everyone's emotions sometimes run high on these patriotic holidays, and those of us who are anti-state, just almost anything you say can be offensive, even if you don't intend it that way.
Yeah.
So it can be hard.
And not only anti-state, which really covers everything, but anti-war.
Yes. Which
drags you much closer to the soldiers. And then what are we doing, So, that's one of my questions on this whole topic. So what in fact and I'm lumping them all together, and I know that's not fair, because not all the wars are exactly the same. Of course not. But in general, what have the soldiers died for? Right? You got to think about that a little bit. But I wanted to make an immediate aside. Almost never is there a mention when people ask about the soldiers, and as Memorial Day is about the memory, right? Memorializing those soldiers who died in, I would argue, the countless wars,
right?
Which is sad commentary unto itself. But there's rarely, I don't recall one time, but that doesn't mean other people haven't. There's just rarely a mention of the innocent people who have died in those foreign wars.
Yes, and that's worthy of memorializing
as well.
And I saw someone, I think they were British, that was on in a group that I was in, commented that, and I don't know if this is a common thing or if this is a usual thing, but that they also memorialize, or him, I don't know if him or everyone or whatever, but like conscientious objectors. That was an interesting take on it. I don't think that we can really talk about saying that anyone's protecting our freedom unless we have the right to object, or if we have the right to say we want to remember those who have been killed unjustly, these kind of things. But it's like I said, you really push buttons when you talk about these things on certain holidays.
Yes, you
Maybe
do.
all the time, but especially at certain times.
I would agree. They're probably a little more emotionally charged on those holidays than other days. But so those aren't mentioned, and what does that mean? I'm wondering, are people really thinking those other lives are somewhat less meaningful? And I get that they didn't know them personally. It's not that I can't comprehend that. Well, it was my nephew who was killed versus some person in a foreign land. I don't even know their name. How am I really supposed to memorialize them? But when you continually memorialize these guys all as heroes, and again, none of the situations was I in. So some of them probably were truly heroes. Some of them probably truly the opposite of that. Again, what numbers? I don't know. Just the different situations that present themselves in a horrible situation called war.
I think in these very specific situations where soldiers get into these battles, I think there are great acts of heroism, and those things do happen when you're talking about you're there literally defending someone's life. But I think we could argue that so many of them have been duped into believing that they're fighting for a cause. And what I think is the most tragic thing of all would be, and we need to know the truth and we need to talk about the reality, because the most tragic thing of all would be if people are dying for giving their lives for something that is not really saving anyone or protecting anyone. What if it's just the opposite?
There you go.
That if we can't ask that question, we talk a lot about freedom. On the patriotic holidays, we hear a lot about freedom and justice and these kinds of things. But if we can't have these discussions,
then we're
not free.
Right. And I think that's very important and well said. I just want to run through these quickly because I do want to get to the topic or the main topic or the feature story of the day. But there are some so many weird circumstances. In the case of a lot of U.S. wars, many were conscripted into the wars, so they were in a bad position, arguably before the war started, that if a war started, they were going to get drafted. And I feel for them. They had little or no choice. Even in a voluntary army, I think and this is maybe a goofy thing to say, but are you somewhat more accountable for your actions than if you go in voluntarily? But some of these people are in a sore spot economically, and they think, well, this is probably my better alternative, so I'll just do it.
In our experience, my husband and I have talked a lot about the fact that, he's a veteran, and there are a lot of poor kids who, our society really, there's a lot of, what do I want to say? There's just a lot of glory associated with being a soldier. And so people who maybe don't have the economic means of success then can feel that they can find success or find some kind of glory in this. And that's a sad thing if there isn't really any glory in it, if it's for someone's economic interests, or if it's for the interests of someone wanting more power, wanting more control, wanting an empire. Those are not good reasons to give your life. So and it's really a cultural thing that we kind of there's just a lot to I don't know. My view, I'm always so extreme, but I think the state is a religion, and this is our human sacrifice.
Yeah,
you see that kind of in every religion and every culture that seems to come about, and the state is no different. So I don't know. I guess that's a radical statement. So my views are not necessarily the views of the show, but
no, I think it's a great analogy. It's spot on. So if you are conscripted into war, you're drafted, right? And again, the others in a voluntary setting felt like they really had no choice, and maybe they in fact still do. But leave that argument aside for the second. You're essentially, if you're conscripted, you're essentially kidnapped. But if for a moment, if it's an unjust war, you're actually kidnapped to fight for the elites, the connected, right? And what do they want by this? They want to either gain or keep an advantage that they had maybe in a marketplace. They want to gain more authority, so I don't know, to get more constituents. I don't know all the reasons why people are nuts. I don't know if that's right. Maybe they want to gain friendly rulers in a foreign land, so they can, again, sustain or maintain their competitive advantage or grow it, But I would argue that, a lot of these guys who went to war, obviously the innocent people who happen to be in the wrong place, the wrong time, they're all victims of an unjust war, if that's the the case if this is an unjust war. And I could argue a huge majority of at least the U.S. wars were, I would argue, were unjust. But that's, again,
definitely wars of aggression,
yes,
not
of
not
defense.
fought in defense. So.
Yeah. But think about this. If you are a soldier fighting in what turns out to be an unjust war, or maybe you should have known ahead of time, but so the policies, right, are wrong, is what the argument is. It's unjust war. So you're actually fighting for injustice, right? So you got to be careful when you engage in this stuff, And if that's the case, are you responsible for the killing of innocents? Are you responsible for the atrocities? I mean, personally, or can you just say, "Well, that was the policy, so hey, it's not my fault."
Right.
Think about it, and I think a lot of people are willing to say, support the troops. I don't know what's it, support the troops, and I don't know, fight about the policy later or something or whatever. But think about what you're saying, and I'm going to get to this in a second. But think about that. If you can support the troops but not the policy, I think there's a disconnect there. I'm reminded of this meme that went around a little while ago. It's something like, this is not an exact quote, but something like, even though I disagree with the policies of Darth Vader, I support the stormtroopers. Now, to most people, that sounds insane. Well, that's what I'm arguing. People are saying where, hey, I maybe dislike the policy, but I'm supporting the troops.
Well, somehow when it comes to the state, personal responsibility seems to go out the window. It relates to the topic that we're going to get to when
Yes.
it comes to things like, are we represented? Or, when people are voting, Lysander Spooner had some interesting things to say about, who is your representative and what's the definition of that? Those
Yes.
are good things to look at, because most of the time, if it has anything to do with the state, it's just either I join the military or I vote or I do these things, but I'm not personally responsible for the policies behind or the actual outcome. Like, whatever I believe it is, but I like to look at the facts and the reality of what's actually being accomplished, what's actually being done here. And I think that it's good to ask ourselves, if what's happening, whether it's a war or whether it's a politician doing something in office or whatever, if I have participated in that, where is my responsibility for what I've chosen to do?
Right.
Or what I've chosen to support?
Exactly. Or what you've chosen not to support.
Right.
Right. You've made a decision either way. And that's an interesting subject unto its own. I'll just wrap this up so we can get right to our feature story of the day. But, I have a couple questions. Why is there seemingly no meaningful reflection on the avoidance of future wars? Right? The whole, at least to me, again, this is just my perception. It's like at least 95% or more of the attention is put on the deaths of soldiers, memorializing them. I think maybe the best way to memorialize them, though, is to say, hey, you fellas out here and women in the cemetery, we're going to do our best to make sure nobody joins you. Right? I would think that's the best way to say, hey, well, if the job had to be finished, you did it, and no one else needs to die. It seems like there should be a lot of focus on that.
I don't know. Some of my conservative friends might say, no, you're a bleeding heart liberal and you're just talking crazy. I don't know.
Well, all right. That's great, because that's a perfect segue.
Avoiding war. What a crazy idea.
And I well understand the case. People go, well, hey, you got to have a deterrent, right? Not many people pick a fight with the biggest tough guy in the school, right? It's kind of crazy to do so. So I get that. But here's the problem. So you have this huge standing military, right? And intelligence gathering apparatus, all this stuff, right? But can we not see that? And I get that. And the argument is, I think I wouldn't have to say even be made by someone. I understand that deterrent effect there. But think about this. There's also then the propensity to use that apparatus. It's like, well, we got this giant tool sitting here in the garage. Why don't we just use it? Right? Everything starts to look like a nail to you if you got a big hammer.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I think that actually has more weight here because look at the history. I'm very much critique saying, well, you want to speak theoretically and not practically. Well, I'm going to say as a practical matter, the United States has had a pretty large military for at least 60 years, right? And they've been using it. I mean, it's pretty much not gathering any dust.
Right. There's always a new threat.
Yeah, we can always figure out something to do with the tanks and stuff. We can find somebody to shoot. And it just seems like that's been the case. So the deterrent effect, although I agree that there is such a thing, but there's also this, desire to use that tool, that big hammer that's laying around and again, see everything as a nail. And I'll just add to this, and then I'll go away. 700 military bases around the world, and a budget, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but essentially greater than the rest of the world's defense budget combined.
I think a good question to ask is, does that represent your desires? Does that represent your interests? If we're going to talk about representation,
there you go.
Does this military budget, does another war and another war and another war? I mean, I don't think that the majority of people really support the policies, support the spending, and yet it still happens. So in a system where it's supposed to be a representative democracy, why are our interests? I don't talk. Yes, I talk to people that are pro-military, but honestly, most people, when it comes down to it, they do say they don't support the policies, or they're not necessarily 100%. So, where is this coming from? If we're truly being represented,
I was just going to say,
why don't we get what we want?
Tanya, it's all cool. All you got to do is vote.
Right. So we want to explore whether that works or not, and that's a utilitarian view, and we always stay. I don't know if you can kind of explain. You always explain that in the beginning of talking about libertarian philosophy. That we're talking about a kind of a foundation, or that to aggress against someone's person or property is unjust and it's immoral. So we're not arguing about whether it works or not. But then the objection that you often get, if you say that you support a stateless society, that you do not think that government as we know it is necessary to our survival, then the argument that you usually get is that won't work. That there's just no practical way to make that happen. So, and would you say that's a utilitarian argument? It doesn't really matter whether it's moral. It doesn't really matter whether it's just. It's just that
exactly
nothing else works. So
right.
This is what we have to do. So what I really wanted to do with this topic was to ask the question, how's that working for you? Is your way working? If you like the state and if you vote and if you say that's the way that we're going to get free and that's the way we're going to fix all this stuff, is it working? And I think the facts are very telling.
So let me be the devil's advocate, because
okay.
I'm, as you see, the horns up there, so I have to play my part.
Did we cover all of our our
no, we had
stuff, kind of our introductory? I sort of segued into the topic there, but I was thinking of that same thing. Wow, is this representing our interests then, all this war?
Exactly. That's where I was intending to go, and you did
That's
it
where my mind is at. So
before we really hit this hardcore, I just have to remind everyone you're listening to the Annoying Peasant Radio Show, and we're so happy that you joined us. So with that thought, being the devil's advocate, well, Tanya, things aren't so bad. I mean, people aren't starving in the streets. It's not, the end of the world. What are you complaining about?
Well, yeah, I guess that's true. Although I would say that everyone would probably say that they're, regardless of how politically active you are, where you stand, would say that there are a lot of things that aren't the way you want them to be. I think it's baffling to most people. Why do all these things happen when nobody really seems to want them, or everybody seems to want a certain thing and we don't get it, or how does this work? So, but
at least in this country, Tanya, I have a say. I can vote. Some countries they can't do that.
Well, let's find out if you really do.
Yes,
that's the question we have to ask, and we have to find out if you really do have a say.
Yes.
Are you having a say, or are you just?
Does your vote?
Is it just a pointless exercise because I don't vote and you don't vote.
Nope.
And, and I get told all the time, you have to do something. Well, I've learned that, I'm not actually accomplishing something by doing that. And even on the other side of it, it's a different show. Our deeper philosophy is that I would be then aggressing against others and trying to force them to do it the way I want to do it. That's not my desire. So I don't vote. So I want to say, is this working? And then I want to say, what can we do instead? I'm like anyone else. I want to say, does something besides voting work? Is there some way we can get free? They say, one guy, he says, libertarians don't do solutions. We get accused of that all the time.
Yes.
We don't have answers. We want to educate you about this philosophy and get you all stirred up, and we don't have any idea of what you could do. So there's some really interesting things that some people are doing. I think some may be more effective than others, but there's really good stuff that we can talk about tonight. Some ideas, some strategies maybe.
Okay.
Other than voting. So that could be interesting. But no, I would hope with this topic of representative government to convince you from the facts that representation for the average American doesn't exist in our society. I want to also look at, because a lot of people point to the Founding Fathers, they point to the Constitution. I want to look at their view and find out what did they really think about representation. And also we found some little known historical facts about that, kind of those early days of the Constitution and the amendments, and then to talk about, wrap it up by talking about what are some things that people are doing to try to change this. Are they effective? Do we like them? Pros, cons, that kind of stuff, kind of action items. So
excellent. She just told you what she's going to tell you.
Told you what I'm going to tell you. So yeah. Well, I was thinking, should we start with that? We talked a little bit about the article that said it was called "Study Congress Literally Doesn't Care What You Think."
Yes.
The website is represent.us. They've got a Facebook page too where that video is. I'm gonna take a look at that here, so I'm looking right at it. Yes, it's on their website, and there's a good video on there. That's the one we said is on the Facebook page. Corruption is legal in America. But these professors, it was one from Princeton and one from Northwestern. I guess they looked at more than 20 years worth of data to answer the question, does the government represent the people? And there's this really interesting, they took public opinion surveys, I guess, compared to what actually
happened.
Became law.
Legislation.
And what they found is that public opinion has a near zero, statistically insignificant impact on U.S. law.
And you would get that if you watch that video on the Facebook page.
Yes, please watch that video because you'll get to really see it visually. They show it in a graph. They say, well, in an ideal republic, on the one axis is, the percentage of the public that supports something versus how likely it is to become a law. And then that graph should be like a perfect diagonal line going right up the middle. If 50% of the public wants something, it should have a 50% chance of becoming law. Now it's a different argument of whether majority rules is a good thing or not. That's another show.
Argument. So,
but we're just saying, okay, so the likelihood of something becoming a law should then, if 90% of the public supports something, it should have a 90% chance of becoming law. But what they found, to tell
this is so
what the reality is.
So, of course, we're expecting that diagonal line that starts, being the engineer, at the origin and goes up, right, at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah, you're the math guy. Yeah. You explain the graph.
Right, that's what you're expecting to see. You'd say in an ideal world, that's what you would see. Again, leaving aside the idea of majority rule is a good idea or not. That's out the window for the moment.
That's the next show.
We're talking about representative government, right? Well, so you're expecting to see something that it gets close to that. Well, you basically see, and I don't recall the number exactly. It's like a 30% probability, and it's flat
line.
In other words, when you interpret that, and they do a great job of pointing this out, and they do this ingeniously because they had me. Because of the next thing they show. But
Right.
so they go, if none of the public supports it, there's a 30% chance that this thing will become law. If essentially 100% of the people support it, there's a 30% chance of it becoming law. If there's 50% public support, there's about a 30% chance of it becoming law.
Was that shocking to you? Was that a shocking statistic, or were you like not surprised?
No, I actually was a little shocked.
I was pretty shocked.
I was like, I thought there's more influence there than that.
I thought the line would have just a little slant to
yes,
it.
I would. It's not a perfect line, but it's just got a slight variation.
Yeah.
Is how, again, watch the video, see the graph for yourself.
Yeah.
But it's
But the
like,
facts do show that there is one way to have the graph work a little more in your favor.
yes. So I see that and I'm like, that's a little dumbfounding, but okay, wow, that's interesting. That's great information. And so I conclude from that, I look at that, okay, wait, it doesn't matter if you all support it or none of you support it. All this stuff has about a third chance of passing, of becoming law. Of whatever gets proposed, it's got about a third chance of going in. And so it really, and since it doesn't matter what the public support is, so go ahead, vote. It doesn't have any meaningful contribution other than they can say 62% of the eligible voters voted. Or they
Right.
can say 22% voted or whatever.
For the average American, whatever your views are and whoever you're voting for and whatever policies you're trying to get put into place, you have a statistically insignificant
Effect.
influence on that. Yeah.
Yes. So it doesn't work.
But who does
So
have
yes.
a significant influence?
This is the awesome part. So I'm thinking, wow, I mean, I'm a little perplexed by that whole thing. And then they say, hey, but here's the deal. We just gave you the information for the, if you will, bottom 90% of income earners. And so we took the top 10% as a separate group. And now we're going to graph them on there. And now you look at their graph, and of course, is their graph perfect? Absolutely not. It's not the graph that you would want to see, that 45 degree. Well, I don't know if want to. Yeah, you'd want to see, I guess. It's a graph that it does start at the origin. In other words, this is the interesting thing. If none of the top 10%ers support something, it does not get passed. That to me was the biggest thing. It's
Right.
not that they can get necessarily something they want passed. If they want to stop something, they can do it. So go ahead and propose a billion pieces of legislation. If they don't want any of them to pass, they ain't passing.
But if 90% want it and the top 10% don't,
Right.
ain't happening.
Exactly. It is not happening. So then you get to the other extreme where essentially 100% of that top 10% support something. They have like a 60+%
Yeah, I can't
chance.
remember.
I believe it was
You analyzed the graph more carefully than I did.
I believe it was over 60%. So in
Yeah.
other words, double the possibility or the percentage that normally happens to the, well, I shouldn't say normally happens, that happens to the other 90% of the population.
Right. Big picture, it's much closer to
That ideal line.
nobody wants it. It doesn't happen. Everybody wants it.
It does happen.
Is going to happen. So, yeah. So that's interesting. And
But the other thing I want to just point out, so most people defend the state right away as because I have a say, everyone has an equal say. That's how we participate. That's how we get a democracy. That's how we get things to be fairer than they are in other countries.
but that graph seems to show that everyone does not have an equal say.
I would argue it definitely shows it does not happen. The elites have the system, which is why I played the Carlin clip.
So who are the elites? Are we just vilifying people who have a lot of money? Wealthy people are evil.
Yes. No.
Yeah, I don't think that.
Since I'm poor, I'll have
Yeah,
to go
I
with
don't
a yes.
think that. But they're talking about, that I think, I'm not sure with their statistics if they just use the top 10% of income earners, but the idea is that people who are well connected
Yes.
to the government and corporations, companies, big enough businesses who can hire lobbyists, and actually their influence is not, they have the same vote you do, but the influence does not appear to be in the voting process.
Yes.
It appears to be coming through other means. So
Yes. That's the
No.
interesting. When I facetiously answered yes, and I don't even know how really to describe my answer, but I'm going to try. I kind of mean it, but I'm also in jest.
I think I know where you're going with this, but we'll see.
And I know highly successful people that have worked very hard and have largely done it on their own will be offended by me saying that, and I get that, and I don't intentionally want to offend anyone, but think about this: the really big guys, I would argue, do not by and large have gotten there without using the long arm of the law to help them get there.
Right, I agree with you, and I think that it's just how the game is played.
Yes,
I think that if you set a goal to not use aggression against anyone and to not use government means to succeed,
good luck.
I can't imagine that you could end up in that top 10%
yes.
of income earners.
And maybe it's 9%.
I mean, it's possible. I'm not saying there's not the exception to that rule, but
and there is likely, but it's slim.
Right.
Right. You. So I'll leave it at that. And now,
so as an argument, there was another article that was discussing this research, but they used the word oligarchy.
Yes,
that is what we have. We do not have a representative democracy.
Yes,
we have an elite group.
But what's so interesting is the 90% basically will fight tooth and nail to argue that we do, and this is what makes our system so great here. When the facts show that they're being screwed over by the other 10%. I mean, that's the simpleton way to put it, but
right.
And they'll want to support.
Everybody's had a good public school education. That's another show. You can check the archives. We already did that show.
They send their young boys off to war to die. What for these 10%?
Right.
Which was I was alluding to early in the show description. It pales, but that's why I think this information is so important. Hey, don't be persuaded by our discussion here. Look at the graph, the video yourself. You decide.
Maybe on the heels of Memorial Day, this is a good question to ask. Good things to investigate, find out what's the truth.
Okay, so now there's a second part to this graph, the lobbyist part.
Right. And there was a lot of stuff. Now, I put down, in the last 5 years, the 200 most politically active companies in the United States spent $5.8 billion influencing government.
Okay, wait. Slower. In the last 5 years only 5 years we're talking about.
200
most politically
companies,
active.
Politically active. $5.8 billion spent influencing government.
Well, they're crazy. They just wasted all that money. They aren't going to get anything for that. They think they are, but they won't.
Well, they got a $4.4 trillion
in return.
That's taxpayer support. That's your money if you're in the 90%.
Yes.
That's a 750 times return on their investment. Pretty good investment, I guess. If you're okay with stuff like that, it pays pretty well.
The 4 cents that I have to invest, my investment guy has not told me about this investment of 700% return.
For me either.
I didn't get that. I didn't get that email.
And I would add, and they didn't even say this. This doesn't even count. This is just strictly how many dollars they put into lobbyists and influencing policy and what dollar figure return they got back. But it doesn't count the increased profits that they gained by suppressing competition. How much did you lose in your business because this was happening? I mean, there's a lot of dollars not accounted for there. It's just straight up what they can
count,
what they can see.
Yes.
So yes, there's the seen and the unseen, and so there's a lot of unseen also. So these are big numbers.
I have no information. It just conjecture, but to me it seems like a bit of an iceberg deal. Like the number is actually the top of the iceberg, where we know most of the iceberg
I wonder.
is below the water.
There's more. I mean, in the lost. What we lose as a result of the way this system works is just almost. I mean, it's not really calculable.
Yes.
So that's
great.
Everything we talk about. I say that's another show. We should just do a whole show.
Yeah, we got so many shows.
We could go on and on. We've got a list, but no, it talks about the campaign costs, and we'll get to this later. We talk about the size of congressional districts and kind of how this all works. But at this point, like every representative in Congress, in the House of Representatives, are like over 700,000 people per representative. It costs $14,351 a day average for a Senate seat to run for Senate. And presumably to win or to have a chance of winning. So you're talking about politicians who have had to become more and more dependent on this tiny percent of people who can bankroll their campaigns. It says, okay, here's the statistics. They spend 30 to 70% of their time fundraising.
30 to 70.
Right. 2/3 of the funds come from 0.2% of the population. If I've got that right, I'm not sure if they've got this right I want to make sure that I'm getting this right here. 2/3 of political donations come from just 0.2% of Americans. So we're not even talking the 1%. We're talking the 0.2%. So they're spending 30 to 70% of their time, and most of that time is spent courting the 0.2%. I'm thinking that's not you. I know it's not me.
No.
So, yeah, okay.
Think about that, though. To put this
microphone.
to put this in perspective, so you're running for governor of New Jersey. Who are you going to spend your time soliciting campaign funds? Are you gonna find a guy like me where you can't squeeze any juice out of the turnip? I mean, what's the point? There's no reason for that guy to meet with me. I could tell him I love him. I want everything that he wants. Good luck there, fella. I can't really help you anyway.
I'm looking at this whole mess, and I'm thinking perverse incentives. There's incentives for the politician to, schmooze with the wealthy, connected guy, or girl, or whatever, woman.
Yes.
And then there's an incentive for that wealthy person contributing to, get something from the relationship. And the rest of us are pretty much out in the cold, but I can guarantee that we'll be paying for whatever deal is made there. It's going to, we get the bill.
That 90%, I would argue, is essentially useful idiots.
Right.
They want to use us at a town hall meeting to make it look like they're, what was it, Hillary's active listening, or I can't remember what she called it, right? It looks good. It's a great photo op. But it's absolutely meaningless because these people can't put anything behind what, even if they have completely legitimate concerns. I got some big business tycoon who's willing to, put $1 million to my campaign to do the opposite of what this guy's saying. If I don't have the $1 million, I can't be in there to do anything.
Well, the more I saw this, it played into my decision to stop voting. I mean, there's a moral argument to that also, but where kind of the whole thing started to crumble for me is I don't like to be played. The last election that I voted in, I just started to really feel like I was being used, that I didn't really have a say, that my views were not being represented, but that I was, that I was being manipulated, and it just really, that just doesn't go well with me. I don't like that.
Don't piss off mama.
Right, yeah. I don't like to be deceived and manipulated, and that really offended me. So, but you can't blame, with the system that works this way, you cannot necessarily, it's like I said, it's the way the game is played that the candidate with the most money wins 91% of the time. Yeah. So, you could take a principled stand. You would say, I will not participate in this, but you will lose. Yeah. And so what do you do? That's just how it goes.
So the compromise a candidate makes, well, if I lose, I can't have any effect going forward. Right. So I got to play the game to win, because at least I can, maybe I don't have to do 100% of what those elites want me to do, but anything that I can do to help the 90%, that's, virtuous on my part.
Right. Well, and hey, even the 90% will say you're not even worth considering if you aren't a viable candidate and you don't have enough money and all this stuff. So everybody expects that to be the way it is. But look at this. They spend, it says 30 to 70% of their time is fundraising. But then, the rest of that time, a significant amount of the rest of that time has to be spent doing things to keep your donors happy, keep the contributors. It's not just begging for funds. That's what they spend at least half. They're spending half their time on average doing that, and then the rest of the time, it's not about you. Still, it's not like they use the leftover time for you.
Think about that. Half the time, roughly, right? You're House of Representatives. You're in there. It's a 2-year term, so you spend a year.
I know.
Gathering the campaign funds, and then you're a year.
Every 2 years.
At best, you're a year. You're actually on the job.
And what they say, 10.2 years is the average time. So,
right.
They stay. And I mean, I forgot what the statistics are as far as incumbents. I think we'll even get to that. I think it's in the next article. But incumbents win an overwhelming
majority of the
time.
Yeah, crazy.
That's got a lot to do with the next thing we're going to talk about. So I wanted to talk about this this website. It's 30,000.org. That's 30-1,000 in words, .org. And this was just their introduction on their website. This is an organization. The 30,000. I didn't get that, and you asked me that. I'm not sure.
The question was that
this was.
Why 30,000 right from the beginning? From the idea was that a representative would represent approximately 30,000 people, and they thought you really can't be effective if you're representing more than that. Right. Essentially,
that was generally the idea of the founding fathers, because I get a lot of that when I talk about these things. I was previously a constitutionalist. This was the stuff that I was, and I don't know. People are going to be hating on me because I say now I'm not in support of the Constitution, but I have my reasons for that. It's another whole show. But
See,
anyway,
another one.
No, but if you say, okay, the principles that you believe in are supported by the Constitution, and that's what you want to get back to, then what were the ideas of the people who framed the Constitution and the Bill of Rights? And their idea was that I can't remember which one it is. I'm sorry. I was trying to look it up. I don't know. I don't know if it was Madison.
John Jay. I don't. There were so many of them.
The 30,000 number came from a quote somewhere, I think, that said that that representation was impossible
beyond that,
with more than 30,000 people per representative, but that the founding fathers wanted to stay with the 50 to 60,000 number per representative. And what we have today with the 435 representatives in the House is over 700,000
per rep.
Yeah, constituents per representative and counting.
Yes, it's going up.
So that's a way different, was that the vision of the founding fathers?
I think not. But my vision is a 1-to-1 ratio. In other words, you represent yourself.
Yes. But see, now when you're talking about government, people say, no, we're a republic, so this isn't a pure democracy where everybody just gets to vote and the 51% wins. But, when you're talking about having a government and you're talking about the Constitution, and that the idea of a republic is that you would vote for someone to represent you. So the question we're asking here, we're saying, okay, so we have a republic. Is anyone representing you?
Right.
And we're arguing no.
Negatory.
It was, what was the name of the article, the first?
Yes.
That was, did you know about this?
No.
Okay.
See, Tanya's educating me again.
I guess in the beginning, the proposed amendments to the Constitution, what actually ended up happening, there were 12 rather than 10, and one of these was the very first, was supposed to be the First Amendment. Kind of a bizarre story, but it was. I'm not real clear. I looked in different places. I believe the Senate actually passed that the congressional districts would be no larger than 60,000, and I think the House it was 50, but somehow the wording got changed when it went to the states for ratification. It was passed, and then they changed it from no more than 60,000 to no less than, or something to that effect, where they changed the wording. And so it just threw whether it was on purpose or whether it was just a botched
or an error
thing. But ultimately it died. And so something that really would have made a huge difference in the way that the system worked and the way the representation worked was just dropped. And then ultimately in 1929, Congress passed a law that limited the House of Representatives to 435 members because they were out of seats and because any other idea that they had was going to be a threat to incumbents and it was going to move them out of their districts and different things like that. So they just said, okay, that's it. We're just capping it at 435. And they made it so the states, I guess, could just kind of carve up the districts for themselves, right? Is that pretty much the way the thing works today?
But that's a very interesting point. Yeah, what you just said. Most people, I think, well, we have the number of representatives, et cetera. The whole system is set up the way it is so that it works best for us. It represents us better, right? But what you find out when you look at it, and I encourage anyone to go find these facts on their own and decide, hey, why, because for me, goofy numbers stick out in my head. Why 435? Like, why not 437? I mean, what's wrong with 268?
Because that's how many seats they had.
Right? And
it's the truth.
And the other thing that you mentioned, I think, is even more important is people, which at that time probably was largely men. I'm going to go out on a limb and just say men.
It was all men, yeah.
They had something vested in their positions, right? They had authority. They didn't want to just give it up. They didn't say, yeah, let's just rearrange the deck chairs and I'm no longer going to be the captain. That ain't going to work. Right. I mean, you can arrange the chairs any way you want as long as I'm still the boss, right? That's the attitude. So you're dealing with these other things that I think people don't think of normally.
Right, when they just did what was politically expedient at the moment, and at the moment, it's probably redundant to say that. Anyway, so that was it, and that's what we have today. Only we have these districts getting bigger and bigger, and there really wasn't any reason for that to happen. So it's really interesting. And I noticed, sorry, Alex, I see that Alex is in the chat, and I had been off of the chat room for a minute. He says it's the Illuminati, so that's his take on everything.
That's the eyeball on the $1 bill, right?
Right. That's another show.
Yes,
okay.
Another one.
Oh, so all right. We talked about why we have no increase in the number of congressional districts, but also talk about what's the effect of these supersized districts. We talked about it a little bit already, but 97% retention rate. So you're talking about people who are greatly influenced by this very small number of wealthy contributors. They want whoever appears the most agreeable to the largest groups of people is going to win. Anyone who takes a principled stand is doomed. Okay, it's too large of a group of people. So 30 to 70% of their time spent campaigning, these huge costs. So there's a huge effect. I did look it up. I thought it was interesting that, at this point, first of all, we have a lot of numbers in this show. You like this. You're the math guy.
Yeah.
So was it how many? Over 6,000 representatives we would have today?
Yes, it was something like that.
6,300 representatives we would have today.
To have that proper
if they had limited
ratio.
That way and added districts.
Yes, limited.
And I calculated this and looked at that 50,000 number and just thought, well, how does that actually look? Well, how would things look different? That would be in New York City alone. That would be 170 congressional districts in the city. So, you're talking neighborhoods. You're talking, pretty small groups of people in our area where we live. It's not even 3 counties. And we're pretty far flung out here.
Yes.
So,
it's sparse.
Right. I could drive on up to Ashland and give the guy a piece of my mind. So yeah, I would argue that's a better system.
Right.
That's it doesn't fix everything, but it would look very different.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, speaking of numbers, Tim threw a number in there earlier. We were talking about wars, and that. Hey, I made partly the argument, not a full case by any stretch, but just said, hey, you got this big military-industrial complex. You might as well use it. Once you got a big hammer, everything looks like a nail. He pointed out, let's see, America has been at war 93% of the time, 222 out of 239 years since 1776.
Very good. More numbers, more statistics.
That's huge.
That's the big
crazy
one.
Crazy huge.
Wow.
It's not. I don't know how anybody can argue. Well, just because they have it, the only one that pops to my head at the moment is to say, well, it's a really dangerous world, Tom. You don't understand that, so we got to do that.
Have we gotten freer? Has government gotten smaller? War is the health of the state.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
There you go, right there.
Yes, Lou Rockwell is one of the big advocates of saying that. But
Yeah.
do you have more? Because I was gonna. I'll tell you where I was gonna go. I was gonna basically ask the question because I have a quote saved myself. Is it even possible, at any number, whether the number be 30,000 per representative or 700,000 and counting, is it possible to have a representative government?
Is it possible? Well, it depends on your definition of representative.
Exactly. So let me go. Let's see.
I think we need to talk about Lysander Spooner.
That's exactly where I'm going.
All right. See?
He has this question asked of him, or I don't know, he asked himself. He writes about this. Listen to the idea, just the concept of sending an agent, a delegate, a representative on your behalf. He says, no man can delegate or give to another any right of arbitrary dominion over himself. Right? In other words, I can't give the guy authority of arbitrarily. Hey, go do whatever it is that you need to do. And, if you sign me up for a war, I guess I got to go to war, right? Basically, I'm agreeing to anything that you propose or you happen, right? So no man can delegate or give to another any right of arbitrary dominion over himself, for that would be giving himself away as a slave, and this no one can do. Again, that's in contrast to Dr. Walter Block, but that's another show. And this no one can do. Any contract to do so is necessarily an absurd one and has no validity. To call such a contract a constitution or by any other high-sounding name does not alter its character as an absurd and void contract. So Spooner is saying the whole notion of a representative is crazy. 2, and this is all he has, these 2, or that's all I'm going to go through. No man can delegate or give to another any right of arbitrary dominion over a third person. So not only can I not send a representative on my behalf, when I'm actually doing that, if that representative represents 2 people and himself, of course. So, right, I can't have any right of, or that representative can't have any right of arbitrary dominion over a third person. For that would imply a right in the first person, not only to make the third person his slave, but also a right to dispose of him as a slave to still other persons. Any contract to do this is necessarily a criminal one and therefore invalid. To call such a contract a constitution does not at all lessen its criminality or add to its validity.
That crazy Lysander Spooner, just always making so much sense, right?
That's the thing. Most people, including myself, for at least the first 40 years of my life, I didn't know this stuff. I wasn't exposed to it. I didn't really think about it. But this is what's so great about Spooner, in my opinion. He breaks it down to the most basic thing. And yet if you analyze it in the most basic sense and think it's absurd, well, then it has to be absurd if he's representing 700,000 people for sure. I mean, there can't be any room there.
Right. And he has other quotes. I don't know if I have the one I wanted here, but that, he talks about, or you're saying you can't just by expressing preference for one person over another, you don't give them total rights over you. You can't give them rights over someone else, Right. And then there's the flip side of that coin, that if this person is your agent or your representative, are you not then accountable for what
Bingo.
they do? So if you're voting and you're actually sending this person that you voted for, if you're sending them as your representative or your agent, do I then, if they do something that I don't like, do I then have recourse against you if you voted? If I don't, then I would argue that person is not your representative. You're not responsible for their actions.
Exactly. Make it simpler. So, I don't know, I got a court case going, and I'm going to hire an attorney. I hire him for specific limitations on his service, right? In other words, I don't authorize him to do anything. So, he's driving to Chicago, and on his way, he buys a new truck in my name. I'm not obligated to pay for the truck because I didn't authorize him to do so, right? In other words, what we're saying is you can't give the representative a blank check, right?
Right.
Spooner's saying you can't do it, and we're saying even if you did do it, somehow, right? If you made that happen, then I am responsible for the truck.
Well, the voters have no recourse against these so-called representatives, and then the victims of the representatives have no recourse against the other voters who put them there. It's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't follow what we know to be true in the real world
And
outside of the state.
And what about in my district that you voted for the one guy who got the majority or plurality or whatever, depending on the situation, and I voted for the other guy? In other words, essentially, I sort of voted against your guy. Am I bound to him, whatever he does? Because I didn't consent to him in any way, shape, or form, right? And even
Well, that's just the way the system works, Tom.
And the next step is, in the case of you and I, we didn't want any of them. We didn't vote for any single person there.
So you don't have any right to complain because you didn't do anything. But then if you participated in the system, you don't have any right to complain because you played the game and your guy lost. So basically, it always comes down to you don't ever have any right to complain.
Exactly.
And if you do complain, nobody's listening anyway.
But think of the absurdity
funny, not funny, right?
of these situations and really think of the fundamentals of it, and hopefully that'll get you to think about this a little bit. I know it had a profound effect on me. I can't say that about anybody else. I think it did on Tanya too, especially Spooner.
Yes, Spooner wasn't the first person. You told me right from the very beginning, read Lysander Spooner, and I didn't listen for a long time and kind of found some other stuff that I read. But then later on, I was like, oh, this is mind-blowing. How did I not start here? So start with Lysander Spooner.
A short one here. Michael Rotzef, a guy, you can find him from time to time. I haven't seen him lately, but on LouRockwell.com. This is under false pretenses. I can't remember. This article was written years ago, and I'll get you the date here in a little bit. But I'm just going to, again, this will be out of context because I'm going to read one short paragraph. He's talking about how this relates to Spooner. More fundamentally, suppose that every individual has certain inalienable rights. And he used that word because that's in the Constitution, or is it in the preamble? I can't, or the Declaration of Independence. I can't remember.
I think it's in the Declaration.
If they are, in fact, inalienable, they can't be given up. And if one individual does not consent to the illegitimate acts of the state, doesn't this invalidate the state? A vast industry of political scientists has struggled with social contract and other ideas to justify state power. At every turn, there is enormous difficulty in showing that citizens consent to the state, endorse it, and thus make it legitimate. These many attempts prove that state power is morally justified have come to naught. It is impossible to make legitimate that which inherently is not. Not directly, but it relates a little to the representativeness here.
Well, people would argue then if you participate, if you vote, then that's consent. But Spooner makes a pretty good argument that you're not consenting to just anything, or if this person is your agent, then you've got to talk about, okay, if this person is my agent, then what's my responsibility? So, and none of that really seems to
there has to be some limitations.
Real way.
And with them representing 700,000 people plus, how could there be, does everybody get to put their limitations on them? And if they do, that guy can't do anything. So what's the point of sending them? Right? The system does not work. That's what we're arguing here. And we'd like people to think about that.
As I said, that's a utilitarian argument because it is a different argument to say, and Tim pointed that out in the chat room, that it's still a majority rule. I mean, if you're talking about even just a much smaller entity where you're going to vote for someone and they're going to supposedly represent you, that majority rule, you don't negate the rights of the minority just because the majority wants something. I mean, if 10 guys get together and they're all starving and, 8 of them vote to eat 2,
majority rules, dude.
Right. It doesn't mean that's just.
Right.
So that isn't really something that works, but I just think it's really interesting because most people say that, okay, our idea won't work, and somehow kind of give the idea that their ways working, and I'm just arguing that it doesn't work.
Right.
At least it's working for a few people, but probably not you.
Yes.
So
well said. That's perfect. It is working for some people, to be sure. That's why the system is where it is.
I don't know who said this, but I wrote down, men are unwilling to relinquish powers which they once possess.
Absolutely.
It doesn't get smaller. It doesn't lose power. There's this movement. I wrote this down. That was the article, the first Ratify Now YouTube video that I watched, is this movement to reintroduce this amendment and send it back to the states to be ratified, fix the grammatical error or whatever, and put it back to where we would have over 6,000 representatives. Well, I think that's an interesting idea. I mean, sure, I'd love to see that happen, but do you think that the powers that be are going to just say, oh, yeah, sure, just break my district up into, how many would that be? You're the math guy.
Right.
700,000, 50,000, so it's a 14. And
it'd be like 23.
so now I'll be one of, 23.
Right. My powers, my authority's been diluted.
Right.
Right?
And
Instead of being one of 435, I'm one of, what was the number? 6,000. Right?
Yeah. So, there's this movement. I think it's a good idea. I think it would be an improvement. It would be a decentralization, a dilution of power. And I always like to see things go in that direction rather than to the concentration of power. I just don't know how in the world you think you're going to get these guys to give up their power.
They aren't. Think about it. If you're a muckety-muck in authority and you love the authority, which is why you got yourself there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't. There's very few people that get pushed into great positions of authority, and they just are constantly, no, I just will not do it. And at the last second, they succumb. Okay, I'll do it just because you want me to. I mean, these guys want these positions. They campaign half of their time to get it, right? And when I say,
I know, it's like anybody who would want it probably isn't someone that you want to be there.
Yes.
And that's the scary thing.
you don't want a power-hungry person in a position of power.
Well, that leads me to the other thing, because that article, the first movement, was something I put under the question of, are there any good ideas out there for what to do?
Right.
Okay. Like I said, I would love to see that happen, but I don't know if that's practical or a productive use of time and energy. But then on the other thing then that relates to that is that first video we talked about, the one about the legalized corruption.
Mm-hmm.
They want to supposedly make corruption illegal. Well, that movement then, what did I say? That Represent Us is
Yes.
the group, but the act is the American Anti-Corruption Act. Okay, well, they're working to change laws. It is interesting the way that they're doing it, and I think that if you want to change a law, change laws or change that, it's probably the better way to go. They're not looking at changing things nationally, but they're going on a local level and trying to first on a local level, but they're also looking to find a couple of states where they can change the law, anti-corruption laws on a local level where they you can't make these big contributions if you have kind of outlawing special interests. I guess I don't know exactly how the laws are working, but they have passed some of these laws. I guess it says stop political bribery, change lobbying and ethics laws, end secret money by increasing transparency. I don't know how you're going to do that, but give every voter a voice by citizen-funded elections. So they're looking to start a grassroots effort to change these laws, starting locally and then the states, and then to pass, this national law. I would still, the idea they said is that they would then at the local level send clean candidates into the stream.
Yes.
Will that clean up the system? Do you think that will be effective? It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, anything has a shot to push things in a more decentralized direction. I don't argue that,
Yeah,
but
I would agree.
but I'm with you. It's the question becomes: is it worth the energy to do it? In other words, do I have to expend 10 pounds of energy to get a half an ounce
Yes.
of success? Why don't I just take my 10 pounds of energy and fight for the ultimate solution instead?
Yeah, that was my thought. How many... Yes, I think you could possibly be effective at a grassroots level of sending clean not corrupted candidates
Good luck.
into office, and then they start there at the ground level. But how many of them will stay that way? It's just what we were saying. As soon as people get power, then suddenly it's like, okay, I want to fix everything, but first I need to gain power and take over.
Yes.
I mean, I recently read the Communist Manifesto. I had never read that before, but that was pretty much the idea the communists had was, well, we don't really want anyone to have all this power, but first we're going to get it.
Yes.
Then we're going to fix everything, and then as soon as everything is fixed, we're just going to give it up.
Yeah, we won't need power.
But that didn't work, and that never works.
Right.
So, I wonder if this is going to be effective. Like I said, I'm for anything that gets people thinking about decentralizing, diluting power, breaking things down. It's, that if people open their minds up to the idea of secession, so
Civil
I'm not
disobedience.
completely, I don't think this is the most effective way to get it done, but I'm still encouraged when people are thinking outside the box of ways to get around the government.
Yeah, they're trying to do
But they're
it.
trying to use the system to change the system, and I don't personally think that's going to be effective.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm totally with
I think it's too deep. It's too entrenched, the corruption. But that brings me to what I think is the most interesting idea, and I know this was something you shared. You shared that one with me first, right? That came from you, yes, because you said that Luke, my husband, might like that because
Yes,
it
that's
was
what
kind
it
of on the what to do side, how to take action, and he's really the action guy, and I think Tim liked that one too. But do you want to just kind of share about what that was?
basically, I even draw the analogy to it's a little bit of secession. Tom Woods is big on secession, but it's civil disobedience. To me, it's small scale secession is what I would argue it is, which is basically being civilly disobedient to chip away at the state. And he gave a couple of examples and methods besides, but one of the examples was like speeding. I'm just trying to put this in context for some people to kind of understand a little more closely. Like that's actually you go down the free, I don't know, in rush hour. Well, I don't know. Rush hour in LA is not a good one. But when the freeway's
You're
actually
not
moving
speeding.
in LA, everybody's going 70 miles an hour. When I say everybody, I'm using that as a generalized term. A lot of people are exceeding the speed limit. Well, that's a form of civil disobedience, right?
Right.
I assume there's not many people that go, I actually don't know what the speed limit is on the freeway. I think they're very well aware of it, and they just want to get to their destination, so they disregard the speed limit. And that's what we're saying in part here is just disregard these things that are not criminal offenses.
But this guy has a very specific idea for how to do this, which is interesting.
Yes, this was the good part.
The author of the book is Charles Murray. His book is called By the People, Rebuilding Liberty Without Permission. Okay, so and what you sent me, the article was called Ensuring John Galt, and
Yes.
I think that was on the FEE site, on the
I think I can't
Foundation
remember.
for Economic Education, whatever it was. It was an interview with this author. Okay, so he's talking about ideas for ensuring people against this government intrusion, like so that you could engage in civil disobedience against what he calls where there's stupid and pointless regulations, and there would be some specific guidelines as to which ones would be chosen. Yeah, you got kind of a little diagram there, but and so the idea that people would he talked about a Madison Fund, which would be like legal assistance for individuals who would
A legal
then
defense fund.
disobey these laws, and then also different occupations that would form defense funds. Like, I mean, I know my husband deals with this. He's a contractor, building contractor, and there's all kinds of crazy, expensive regulations that just really get in the way, get in the way of the relationship between the client and the builder and all this kind of stuff. Well, the trades, then maybe they could get together and they could defend themselves against this in this way. So
Because that's a big concern of people when you say civil disobedience, even if they're sold that take speeding, just to keep it simple for a second. I do that, but then I get pulled over and I'm going to get this whopping ticket, right? This is a way, this insurance the idea that Tanya's mentioning here is join this legal defense fund is just one of many possible options, but when we happen to be portraying here in the show. So, yeah, you know, you pay $5 or $10 a month to be part of this. I don't know what the fee would be, right? Depends on how big the association is. And the deal is if you're a member and you say, hey, I just got a speeding ticket here in Southern California, blah, 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 and this is the circumstance, this may interest you to defend this type of action. And so they have this staff of attorneys attorneys that they can readily retain, and they may choose to bring them on your case and defend you because you were insured by the Legal Defense Fund. So that you have a protection. And I think the point of what he had to say was, like you said, identify this weak point and do it in the weak point is essentially a way that you can tie these bureaucrats up. If you have these defense funds, right, that they no longer can regulate anymore because you've got them tied up in these court actions.
Right. Going back to the beginning of the interview, he says, if you're talking about rolling back the power of government, not just in kind of pulling back and getting better policy, but actually rolling back to, if you're a constitutionalist and you're saying you want to go back to the Constitution, he says you can't get there from here with the normal political process. Yep. That's my thing, is that my thing with not voting and all that is you can't get there from here. We've got to find a different way, a different strategy. So anytime I see someone who's really thinking in a different way and saying, here's a way around this, then I think that's brilliant. And I think if we can do that in a million different ways, we may actually find ways to erode the power of the state and eventually bring the behemoth down.
You have regulators, and they're busy regulating every day. If you can tie them up in court and drain their resources that way, they can't spend that time regulating the other guys out there at the time, right? And they may just say, hey, here's the deal. We don't want to fight this to the nth degree. We'd like to slap you with a fine because we want to move on and regulate and find more people.
He talks about it being like the Wizard of Oz. He wants to pull back the curtain and show that most of these regulators actually have a very small staff. They exist and they continue just by the threat that they're just going to make an example of one person every once in a while so that you're just afraid. But really, if everybody disobeyed them all at once, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it. They don't have enough people to go after you.
The manpower isn't there.
And so then it's just saying, if you had this legal defense fund behind you, like he calls it the Madison Fund, he says, okay, so then the state goes after you for some stupid law, and then suddenly the Madison Fund is behind you and ready to dig in for the long haul and defend you
and drag it out.
They're not going to bother.
Right.
They don't want to spend the money, and they don't have the staff. And if this happens more than once,
right.
It's just not going to happen.
So they can't regulate anymore.
So he says it's kind of like he said on the highway, if you're speeding, he says no harm, no foul is the system that he wants, so that they have to reserve their money and their energy to go after people who are hopefully actually doing something wrong.
Real criminals.
Right. You would have to be way over the line to be worth it. Just like when you're speeding, you'd have to be way over the speed limit, or you have to be driving erratically or actually doing something dangerous. Most of the time, if everybody's going 20 miles over the speed limit, they're only going to be able to pick out the worst offenders.
Right. I'll give this. Why are cops spending time trying to find college students that have a fake ID? And you say, well, wait a minute, I don't want my son or daughter to be able to go into a bar when they're not of legal age. Yeah, but that's at the expense of, hey, we can't catch that murderer because we don't have the resources to do it. Well, that's because you're spending time trying to stop a college kid from getting a beer. I'm thinking prioritize a little bit here, right?
Well, but it is sometimes worth their time to keep everyone in line to pick out enough people to make examples of, because they don't want mass civil disobedience.
Exactly.
And this is ensuring civil disobedience, so that hopefully at some point, people the would snowball and people are less afraid.
Yes.
And that, that's what I'd like to see. You're free when you're not afraid to do things that are not morally wrong.
They're peaceful.
Right.
You should be able to do anything peaceful.
If this is a nonviolent, peaceful solution, I think that's brilliant. He says there's no going back because there's been these key expansions that can't be reversed. That He said if we went back to the enumerated powers in the Constitution, it would make 90% of government spending unconstitutional.
Right.
So that's never going to happen. So just give up on that pipe dream
all you do
and start
is,
looking for a different way.
Tanya, you just propose a piece of legislation that reduces the federal government, their budget by 90%, and you pass it. That's all you got to do.
Right. They'll listen to you, right? Is it
showed.
everything we just talked about?
Right. The statistics
No problem.
say it's not going to happen.
Right. That it's not looking good
Right.
for us. So it's not that you shouldn't do something. It's just that you should do something different.
Yes.
You should either say something different, teach something different,
Educate.
talk about something
Learn.
different. I mean, we're like the educators. We want to educate, but then other people really, if you want to take an action, I mean, think about these things that we've talked about. If there's something that you think is worthwhile, then I say go for it. I think some are more effective than others, but the idea is, in my mind, to think around the state, think outside the state, under, over, whatever you got to do. That the way to do it is to, I guess, just like poke a hole in the dam. But ultimately, if you poke enough holes in the dam will break, or you make a big enough crack. Things going to go. Long time ago, it was that article about if you convince 10% of the people of something, then the ball is rolling, and the idea is just inevitably going to be adopted by everyone. So if you have more and more of these movements, hopefully not just of trying to roll back the size of the government, but of taking away, what do I want to say? Taking away their legitimacy. That's what I liked about the By the People book, this idea of the defense funds.
Right.
It's seeing the government as an enemy, not a friend or a protector. Saying he talks about treating government as an insurable hazard, like a tornado or a plague of locusts.
Yes, I remember that.
And the guy
That's
says,
good one.
you never know when they're going to strike. And that's true.
Yes.
It's that fear of never knowing when they're going to strike. Hey, they might ignore me, but they might come down and make an example of me that keeps you from acting.
I'm reminded of this book, and I'll give you the title second, and I know you'll recall, but I'm going to say, but Tanya, here's what I'll do. I'll just not engage in any illegal activity, and then they won't be after me, so I won't have to worry about it. And I'm reminded of the book, and you're going to remember, 3 Felonies a Day is the title of the book. And the idea of the book is that you actually commit.
Good luck with not breaking any laws.
Yes.
If they want to go after you for something, they'll find something.
Yes, it's been set up that way to do that. And again, the book is, the idea is almost no matter what you do, you probably committing on average 3 felonies per day. So the point is, if they want to get you, they can get you. They'll hang, and you might say, well, it's ridiculous what they could possibly. Well, yeah, they might want to go after you for, like Tanya said, make an example of you, so they might go after you for something ridiculous, right?
So I say call their bluff. I mean, these are ways of calling their bluff and saying that if I'm not doing anything wrong, if I'm not aggressing against some other person or hurting someone else, stealing from them, then there's no reason to bother me.
I'm going to mention Tim's comments because they're a little ways back. We haven't got to them. But, when we were talking about representative government and those kind of issues, is it really representative? And he says, is it even possible to have a representative government, right? Which we talked about. He says, still supports majority rule, right? And the immorality of that. Just there's 10 of us. I'm the rich guy. The other 9 vote to take the money from the rich guy. Well, yes, the majority does. If you're going to have that type of situation, the majority rules, but it's immoral, right? It doesn't respect my property rights. And I think that's where Tim is going. The only moral way for society to be organized is through voluntary exchange. I totally agree with him. Why inject coercion? It only makes things worse as a practical matter, and it's immoral as a kicker.
Well, and I like to say when I'm talking about no government, I'm talking about no government as we know it. Any voluntary organization that you want to join, if you want to agree to follow certain rules within whatever group you've voluntarily joined, go for it. If you want to join a commune and have everything in common, whatever rules you agree to, but that no one has the right to force you there.
It's the idea of consent.
Right.
And for people who are so afraid of change, go ahead, keep the government you have. Go ahead, keep it. Just let me opt out. Right? I don't have a problem. If you want to be a status, go right ahead. I have a problem when you say, I want to be a status and you must comply with it. wait a minute,
Right.
why must I? I'm not consenting to it. Right? So those, and I think what will happen is people will then very quickly see how such a system crumbles because it's unsustainable, which is, again, part of the broader argument against the state.
That's it. And he talks about in this book, it's a good point that he makes because oftentimes the ideas we're talking about seem so radical or it takes a long time. It takes a long time and a lot of context to change your thinking about these things, and we find that we have a lot of indoctrination. Well, his point is that you don't have to convince people to be libertarians. There are plenty of liberals and conservatives, people who are politically active, who are just tired of being messed with. They're tired of all these stupid laws and stupid regulations, and people who, even though they're not ready to completely opt out of the system, would buy into the idea of insuring themselves against the intrusion by the system. Maybe you want to, if it's on the liberal side, we always bring up the pot issue, but it's like, okay, you want to smoke pot, you don't want to bother anybody, you want to do that, so leave me alone or whatever it is. If you, the Uber drivers was an example that they gave. That's one that we talked about on another show. People cash businesses making routine deposits of $9,999. I don't know. I got a thing not too long ago. I had a mistake in my bank account. Was I telling you? Maybe I talked about this on another show that I got some slip that said I had exceeded the federally allowed number of withdrawals or something crazy like that. Because I had a mistake and my account was overdrawn, and I have the automatic, where it takes from your savings account to your checking. I was like, what? I called and they're like, oh yeah, there's this law, and it's just when we talked to our banker, is a friend of ours, the guy who is the manager of the bank, we talked to him about it. He says, yeah, you don't want to move cash around too much because they're watching you. So I thought, wow, I mean, me? Why would you want to watch me? I'm not doing anything. So that was interesting. But it's just talking about small stuff like that. Even the example of parents sending cupcakes in their kids' lunches.
Yes, I remember that one too now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Organize the parents, organize a cupcake blitz, I
Yes.
guess. I really like cupcakes, so... They would have to be red velvet cupcakes with cream cheese icing. That would be the requirement.
Not to be specific.
Yeah. So, no, those are just some examples of things that people can do. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about the what can you do question?
I know that's a difficult question, actually, I think. I'll try to make it simpler. So back up the clock 150 years, whatever. I'm a slave on the plantation. What do we do? I mean, your options are certainly limited because there's the plantation and the slave owner there. That's the whole problem. You're in a bad spot. So I personally like the civil disobedience, especially, well, I shouldn't say especially, only when they're really not crimes. They're crimes against the state. In other words, I would argue they're just arbitrary rules that the state said. So you're making a crime against the state. That's not a crime.
Right. He starts talking about beginning with very specific criteria. Not that you would stay there. There might be more and more and more laws that you would then. But
expand
at the beginning, it would be to just crumble away this authority and ability. Something I forgot to say. I had some experience with because I'm a member of HSLDA. It's Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and that's an organization for homeschoolers where I pay $10 a month. And if a social worker shows up at my door and demands to be let in, then I just call the number on the little card that I have, and I hand the phone out the door, and I say, you can talk to my lawyer. Right. And that's pretty much how it works. And so then you have a defense because the state sometimes does choose to go after homeschoolers.
Oh, yeah, they certainly do.
And then they will take any case that they deem to be related to homeschooling, whether it's specific to homeschooling or it's just more of a parental freedom case that relates to freedoms for homeschoolers. Just kind of a broad definition there.
My analogy to secession is, I love secession, but like we talked about just prior to the show, Tanya, I think you're not going to get a lot of people to philosophically jump onto the secession bandwagon just because it's just too big of a leap for them. But you might get them to be part of a legal defense fund and do this civil disobedience. And I just think ultimately the answer is you got to try all this stuff because I don't see that any single path is going to be, I go, oh, this is in the bank. This is going to be successful. This will tear down the state. I think so. You do, just as you talked about earlier, you try all these things. People come up with new ideas all the time. There you go. Give that a shot. And some of them I think, oh, wow, that's really going to work. Or some I think, that's probably not going to work. But try them, because I think I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. I think it's unknowable what will actually
around
work.
the edges as much as you can. But it may get you to the point of, people say sometimes, that we libertarians don't have solutions. But, I mean, maybe there is an argument to be made that enough good ideas and enough different ways of thinking, I think ultimately the real effect is in educating people.
Yes.
Just like I think, a lot of people are influenced by Ron Paul. I don't think Ron Paul's real influence was going to be in being president. I think his influence was in taking action that then made a lot of people aware and started them on a path of education.
Yes.
And I think that that's probably the greatest effect that these things have, just getting people to open their minds up to some different ideas that maybe just gets the ball rolling. And that may take you all the way to the point where people are really talking about secession as a viable option.
Right. Absolutely.
So, and once you do that, if your state secedes, then how about your county and your township and then your family?
Yourself.
We're just going to go all the way down to the individual, and then we're there. See?
Right. There you go.
Done deal.
There's the path right there. All right.
I don't know. So I find it encouraging. What about you?
I do too.
I thought it was cool stuff.
That Charles Murray thing, he had some great ideas. I love the idea of the discussion of representative government. I think it brings a lot to light that people don't think about normally. And I think like we always say on the show, we hope we get you to think a little bit about it. And, the Facebook page is there to ask your questions if you're not listening to us live. Of course, you could be in the chat room with Lonely Tim there.
Yeah. Oh, Tim said raw milk. That was another example of one of the
Excellent.
things. That's another favorite of mine.
Yep,
I like
that's
me
a good
some raw
one, Tim.
milk.
Thank you. Do we have anything else to add, or do I need to wrap up the show?
Well, I would just say that if we've convinced you that you're not being represented, let us know. And if we haven't, argue with us. You can on our Facebook page or whatever. Just let it fly and let us know what you think. But I hope to have convinced people.
I think it was compelling.
There is no representation.
I think most people are persuaded by the statistics. I actually, as the wacky dude that I am, I'm saying that's not a conclusive argument, but I know it does relate well to people. They really grasp that stuff. I think basically the Spooner argument is the compelling argument that it's just not possible from a logical standpoint. But I think both together is the most powerful argument. You lay out the theory and go, see, this is what's happening. This is why these statistics are the way they are because of this.
Right.
So I think that's
vote
important.
harder is not an effective strategy.
That leads me to my last bumper sticker quote of the day. Shoot, where do I have? Here you go. My final bumper sticker quote of the day is, vote for the crook. It's important.
Oh, wow.
Right?
That's what I see.
Yes.
That's just, I read all the bumper stickers, and that's actually what I see.
Right? It's the lesser of two evils is still a crook, but you say it's so important, you got to vote for him. Well, I'm highly troubled at that point. Let's just put it that way. But I thought that was funny. Vote for the crook. It's important.
But now we know that's ineffective, so you'll have to do something else.
It doesn't even help the crook. I don't know. So I'm going to close out. I'm going to say again, thank you, Tanya. It was awesome. You did a fantastic job.
Well, thank you.
It was a lot of fun.
Like I said, this was a fun topic. I don't know if I'm the only one that thinks that, but
well, I'll be number 2
very
then.
enlightening to me.
So. Yeah, we learned a lot of stuff, and I just love that graph thing. That's on the Facebook page. We probably will repost it, so it's up higher on the Facebook page, the video.
I already wrote it on my to-do list for the next few days to remember to post these things.
It's that female thing. She's just right on it, organized. That's why I'm in trouble.
No, I write it down because I'm not good at multitasking. I think I missed that trait.
Anyway, I don't even have anything good to leave with. Doggone it. I'll get over here.
Get ready to free your minds.
Whoops.
Advance freedom.
We already did that.
We're gonna leave with Mac
Our minds
DeMarco.
are free.
Our minds are free. Hey, tell your friends, heck, even tell your enemies about the show. Our next show will be next Tuesday night, 7 Central. That's June 2nd. And we hope we provoked you to think tonight. Make your comments again on the Facebook page, and thanks for listening to the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. We hope you thought our discussion was worthwhile. Again, Annoying Peasant Radio Show, we are out for the night, and thank you, Tanya. Awesome job. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Oh, maybe not.
And better all of society.
There we go. Back to Marco.
There we go. All right.
Sometimes rough